I still don't know how I made it out of that house alive. Every time I think about it, my stomach twists, and my hands start shaking. But I need to tell this story, because I know there are others like me who might not be so lucky. It all started when I found the ad online, house for rent, cheap, secluded, fully furnished. The pictures showed a cozy little cabin nestled deep in the woods, exactly the kind of place I needed to clear my head. I had just gone through a bad breakup, and the idea of spending some time alone, away from the noise of the city, seemed perfect. The landlord was an old man named Mr. Langley. He didn't ask many questions when I called, just told me to leave the rent in an envelope on the kitchen counter and to enjoy my stay. It was odd, but I wasn't about to complain about an easy move-in process. When I arrived, the house was exactly like the pictures, maybe even better. The air was crisp, the trees swayed gently in the autumn wind, and the inside smelled of old wood and faint traces of something sweet, like vanilla. Everything seemed fine. But that first night, I woke up cold. The windows were shut tight, the fireplace was still smoldering, but the air around me felt ice cold. I pulled the blanket tighter around myself and rolled over, trying to ignore the chill. That's when I heard it. A faint creaking noise. It came from somewhere inside the house. I held my breath and listened. At first, I thought it was just the old wood settling, but then it happened again. A slow, deliberate creak, like footsteps moving across the floor. I told myself it was nothing, that I was just being paranoid. But when I got up to check, my heart nearly stopped. The bedroom door, which I had closed before going to sleep, was now slightly open. Something wasn't right. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay there, staring at the door, every nerve in my body on edge. When morning came, I convinced myself I must have left the door open by accident. Maybe I was overthinking everything. But the second night was worse. This time, I woke up to the feeling of something watching me. My skin prickled, and the room was so silent it almost felt unnatural. I turned my head toward the doorway, and that's when I saw it. A figure. Standing just outside my bedroom. It was barely visible in the darkness, a shadow against the dim light coming from the hallway. I couldn't make out any details, just the shape of a person, standing there, motionless. I wanted to scream, to run, to do anything, but my body refused to move. My breathing was shallow, my chest tight with terror. And then, just as suddenly as I had noticed it, the figure was gone. I don't know how long I sat there, frozen. Eventually, I convinced myself I must have imagined it, that maybe it was just a trick of the light. But I wasn't willing to take any chances. The next morning, I packed my bags. Before leaving, I wanted to at least check the house one last time, to prove to myself that there was nothing there. But when I went into the hallway, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Scratched into the wooden floor, right outside my bedroom door, were words, for simple words that I will never forget. You should have left. I didn't stay to read them again. I ran. I don't even remember locking the door behind me. I just got into my car and drove until I was miles away. Later, when I finally worked up the courage to look up the history of the house, I found out the truth. Mr. Langley had died years ago. The house had been abandoned ever since. So who, or what, let me in? I didn't tell anyone what had happened. Not at first. For weeks after escaping that house, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that figure standing in the doorway, felt the icy chill creeping through my bones. I had to know the truth. If Mr. Langley had died years ago, then who the hell had I spoken to on the phone? Who had posted the ad? I tried convincing myself it was just some elaborate prank, that maybe squatters had been using the house. But deep down, I knew better. There was something wrong with that place. Something I had barely escaped. But I couldn't leave it alone. I started researching, digging through public records and news archives, anything that mentioned the property. What I found only made my stomach turn. The house had a history, one filled with disappearances, strange sightings, and stories that all followed the same pattern. People who stayed there alone reported hearing footsteps at night. Doors opening by themselves. And worse, some of them never made it out. One case, in particular, stood out. A woman named Claire Matthews had rented the house 5 years before me. According to the police report, she had called 911 in the middle of the night, whispering that someone was inside with her. By the time the police arrived, the house was empty. No signs of forced entry. No struggle. Just an abandoned car in the driveway and a half-packed suitcase in the bedroom. She was never found. I couldn't ignore it. I had to go back. Every instinct in my body told me it was a terrible idea, but the need to understand, to get answers, was stronger. I told myself I'd go in the daytime, just long enough to take pictures, maybe find something I had missed. I brought a flashlight, a crowbar, just in case, and a notebook to document everything. Then I drove back to that cursed house. The drive felt longer this time, the trees pressing in on me as I followed the winding road. When I finally reached the clearing, the house stood exactly as I remembered it. The front door was closed, but as I stepped onto the porch, a chill ran through me. The air smelled different, damp, moldy. Like rot. I hesitated before turning the handle. The door opened easily. Inside, everything was as I had left it, except for one thing. The envelope with my rent money was gone. I swallowed hard and stepped further inside. The wooden floor creaked beneath my feet. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, casting long shadows across the room. I told myself I'd just do a quick sweep and leave. I started with the kitchen. Nothing seemed out of place. The old stove, the wooden table, the dusty countertops, all the same. But when I turned to leave, my heart stopped. A single plate sat on the table. I hadn't noticed it before. A clean, white plate with something on it. A key. My breath hitched. My hands trembled as I reached for it. The moment my fingers touched the metal, a sound echoed through the house. A creak. From the hallway. I whipped around, every muscle in my body tensed. The hallway stretched before me, dim in the afternoon light. I forced myself to move forward, the key clenched in my fist. The wooden floor groaned beneath my feet as I approached the bedroom. The door was open. Inside, the bed was neatly made, just as I had left it. But something was wrong. The closet door, which had been closed before, was now slightly ajar. A shadow lingered at the edge, just beyond my sight. I swallowed my fear and reached out, pushing the door open with a trembling hand. Nothing. Just an empty closet. But the air inside was frigid, and a sickening feeling settled in my gut. That's when I saw it. Another message, scratched into the wood of the closet wall, deep and jagged as if carved by desperate hands. "It knows you're here." A rush of cold air burst from the closet, hitting me like a wave. My vision blurred, my ears rang. I stumbled back, heart hammering, and then, I heard it. A whisper. Right behind me. I spun around, but there was nothing. Just the empty room. Enough. I bolted, my feet barely touching the floor as I raced down the hallway. As I reached the front door, I felt it, an invisible force, like icy fingers brushing against my shoulder. The moment I crossed the threshold, the pressure vanished. I didn't stop running until I was back in my car, engine roaring to life. I tore out of there, dirt and gravel kicking up behind me. Only when I was miles away did I dare to look at the key still clenched in my shaking hand. It wasn't just any key. It had a tag attached. An address. Not for the house I had just fled, but for another one, in a different town. And below the address, a single word was etched into the metal. Run. I tried to convince myself to throw the key away, to forget about it. But I couldn't. The more I stared at it, the more I felt like it was watching me back. That night, I dreamed of the house again. Only this time, I wasn't outside looking in. I was trapped inside, the walls whispering my name. Something was coming for me, but I couldn't move. I woke up drenched in sweat, my hands gripping the key so tightly my knuckles had turned white. I had to go to the new address. The town was small, even quieter than the last. The address led me to a decrepit motel on the outskirts, its neon sign flickering weakly against the night. My stomach churned as I parked. The key felt heavier in my pocket. As I approached room 6, the number on the tag, my breath caught in my throat. The door was already open. Inside, the room was empty. A single chair sat in the center. And on the wall, in the same jagged handwriting, was another message. It's not the house. It's you. Then, the door slammed shut behind me. The moment the door slammed shut, the air in the motel room turned thick, suffocating. I spun around, heart hammering, and grabbed the handle, locked. A sickening dread settled in my stomach. The room was silent, save for my ragged breathing. Then, the lights flickered. A low hum filled the air, vibrating through the walls, the floor, my bones. The fluorescent bulb above me buzzed erratically, casting sharp, jagged shadows. My pulse pounded in my ears as I stepped back, my gaze darting to the message on the wall. It's not the house. It's you. I clenched my fists, fighting the overwhelming urge to scream. What the hell did that mean? My breath caught as the humming grew louder, rising into a shrill, piercing noise. The light above me burst, plunging the room into darkness. I wasn't alone. Something moved in the shadows. A whisper, so close it felt like ice against my skin. You shouldn't have come. I stumbled backward, my heel catching on the chair's leg. I hit the floor hard, pain shooting up my spine. My hands scrambled across the carpet, searching for anything to hold on to. The darkness pressed in, smothering me. And then, in the pitch-black void, a hand, cold, bony, inhuman, grasped my wrist. I screamed. With a violent yank, I tore free and scrambled to my feet, my back slamming against the wall. My hands fumbled for my phone. The screen's dim glow barely cut through the darkness, but it was enough to see the figure standing in the corner. A silhouette. Tall. Twisted. Its head cocked unnaturally to the side, as if examining me. Its fingers twitched, long and spindly, almost too long. And though I couldn't see its face, I knew, it was grinning. My throat clenched. The air smelled like damp earth and rot. I bolted for the door, slamming my fists against it. Let me out. A laugh. Behind me. Low, breathy, delighted. I turned, just as the light from my phone flickered out. Something moved, fast. A rush of air, a whisper of fabric, a presence right in front of me. I felt breath against my ear, cold and wrong. Run. I didn't need to be told twice. Somehow, the door gave way. I burst out into the night, gasping. The cold air hit me like a slap. I stumbled into the parking lot, the neon motel sign flickering overhead. My car. I had to get to my car. I ran, fumbling for my keys with shaking hands. The moment I got inside, I locked the doors, jammed the key into the ignition, and peeled out of there, tires screeching against the pavement. I didn't look back. I couldn't. But I felt it. Something watching. Something following. I drove for hours, aimlessly, my mind racing. The message in the motel room gnawed at me. It's not the house. It's you. Had I brought something back with me? Had it marked me? I pulled into a gas station on the outskirts of town, my hands gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. I needed air. I needed to think. I stepped out, the cold night wind biting at my skin. The gas station was mostly empty, save for an old man behind the counter, watching me with wary eyes. I walked inside. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, too bright, too artificial. The place smelled of stale coffee and gasoline. As I approached the counter, the old man narrowed his eyes. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I swallowed hard. "Something like that." His gaze flicked to my pocket. "You got a key on you?" My blood ran cold. "What?" His face darkened. "I've seen it before. People come through here, looking just like you. Shaking. Scared. They all got a key." He leaned in, voice dropping to a whisper. "And none of them ever last long." I took a step back. "What do you mean?" He nodded toward my pocket. "That key ain't just metal. It's a door. And once you take it, you ain't just dealing with a haunted house." His voice dropped even lower. "You're part of it now." A cold sweat broke over my skin. I slowly reached into my pocket and pulled out the key. The tag dangled, the address still etched into the metal. The old man took one look at it and paled. "Son," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "you need to get rid of that. Now." I tightened my grip on the key. "How?" He swallowed, eyes darting around as if making sure no one else could hear. "You gotta bury it. Somewhere deep. Where it can't find you. And pray it ain't already too late." A chill crawled down my spine. I had made a mistake. A terrible mistake. Something rumbled outside. The gas station lights flickered. The old man's breath hitched. He grabbed my wrist, his grip strong despite his age. "Go. Now. And whatever you do," his voice shook, "don't look back." The front door slammed open as if something had just entered. And for the first time, I saw true terror in the old man's eyes. I ran. The drive was a blur. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to get far, far away. I gripped the key, knuckles white. I had to bury it. I had to end this. But then, my phone buzzed. A message. From an unknown number. With shaking hands, I looked at the screen. My breath caught in my throat. Too late. Then, my headlights flickered. And standing in the middle of the road, smiling that impossibly wide grin, was the figure from the motel. Waiting. For me. I slammed on the brakes, my tires screeching in protest as I swerved, narrowly avoiding the figure in the road. It was just standing there, smiling. That awful, twisted grin. But the worst part? Its eyes. They weren't just empty. They were filled with something dark, something knowing. Something that had been waiting for me. My pulse pounded in my ears as I stared at it, heart racing. I should have driven away. I should have floored the accelerator, left it behind. But my foot was frozen on the brake. The figure took a step forward. My headlights illuminated its face, and for a split second, I thought I saw a flicker of recognition. A flash of something familiar in those deep, hollow eyes. And then, it spoke. "Did you really think you could escape?" The voice was low, distorted, as if it were coming from somewhere deep inside the earth, echoing in the depths of my skull. I slammed the car into reverse, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. But the car wouldn't move. It was like the road itself had become a wall, holding me in place. My breath came in ragged gasps. The figure was getting closer, step by step, its grin widening unnaturally, the air around it thickening with a presence that pressed down on me like a weight. "No. No, no, no," I muttered, panic flooding every fiber of my being. The figure tilted its head, almost like it was studying me. I couldn't look away. My body refused to move. It was as if the car had become a trap, its glass windows pressing in on me, suffocating. I wasn't sure if the air was thinning because of fear or if something was actually happening to the world around me. Suddenly, there was a loud, deafening crack from the roof of the car. I jerked my head up, but before I could react, something slammed down on the windshield, so hard the glass cracked. A hand. A bony, skeletal hand, fingers bent at unnatural angles, leaving deep gouges in the glass. I screamed and jerked away from it, but the hand stayed, pressing against the glass like it was trying to claw its way in. And then, I saw it, a face, just behind the hand, its eyes gleaming in the dark. The same figure. No. Not the same. Something worse. It smiled wider, revealing rows of jagged teeth that seemed to stretch endlessly, impossibly long. A guttural laugh echoed from behind the glass, and I heard it as though it were coming from all around me. It reverberated in my chest, sending shockwaves through my entire body. Run. The voice was distorted, but I could hear the malice in every syllable. The glass creaked under the pressure of the hand, and I could feel the weight of something ancient, something wrong, pushing against me. I had to move. But where? I threw the car into drive, gunning the engine, and the car lurched forward, slamming into the figure in front of me. But it was like hitting a wall. The car bounced back, throwing me back in my seat. I slammed into the steering wheel, the airbag exploding in my face, but it wasn't enough to stop the feeling of dread closing in on me. Then, as if sensing my weakness, the figure on the roof of the car hissed. And then, just like that, the pressure on the car roof released. I didn't have time to question it. My foot was on the gas pedal, my hands gripped the wheel, and I was speeding down the road, my eyes darting to the rearview mirror. The figure was gone. It wasn't there. But I could feel it, in the pit of my stomach. Something was still out there. Watching. I drove for what felt like hours, until the familiar buzz of my phone startled me. I didn't want to look. I didn't want to know. But something inside me, some desperate, sick part of me, forced me to glance at the screen. An unknown number. The same one that had sent the "too late" message earlier. With trembling hands, I answered it. Hello. My voice cracked, sounding foreign even to me. There was a long silence on the other end. Then a whisper, so faint I almost thought I imagined it, "You're not alone." The line went dead. I threw the phone aside, but the feeling didn't go away. It never went away. It was there in the shadows, creeping into every corner of my mind. The presence. The thing that had followed me, that had chosen me. By the time I reached another small town, I was so exhausted I could barely keep my eyes open. The key was still in my pocket, burning a hole through my jeans. I felt its presence like a weight I couldn't shake. But I couldn't stop. I had to keep going. There had to be answers somewhere. Maybe I could fix this, maybe I could find a way to break free. I parked the car in front of a rundown diner and stumbled inside, desperate for anything that resembled normalcy. The bell over the door jingled as I entered, and the smell of grease and stale coffee hit me immediately. There were only a few people inside, an old man reading the paper, a couple of truck drivers hunched over their plates. And then I saw her. A woman, sitting in the far corner booth. Her eyes locked onto mine the moment I walked in, and I felt it, a connection, like a thread was pulling me toward her. I walked over without thinking. "You've got the key." Her voice was soft, but I could hear the weight of it in the air. "You shouldn't have taken it. It's already too late." My breath caught in my throat. What do you mean?" She didn't speak at first. Instead, she pulled something from under her jacket, a key. The same key. "You've seen it too, haven't you? The house? The figure? The messages?" She stared at me, her eyes full of something old and dark. "It's not just a place. It's a curse. It doesn't matter how far you run. Once you've taken the key, it owns you. Who are you? I whispered. The woman's lips curled into a faint, sad smile. Someone who's been where you are. I backed away, the air thick with an overwhelming sense of dread. What do I do? I gasped. How do I get rid of it? The woman's eyes darkened. You don't. You can't. It's in you now. You'll keep running, but you'll never outrun it. The bell on the door jingled again, and the woman stood up, leaving the key on the table. But maybe, she said quietly, maybe you can stop it from getting anyone else. She turned, and as she did, I saw it. Her face was shifting, like a mask, revealing something hideous underneath. A grin, too wide to be human. Her eyes bled into black, the same hollow, endless darkness I had seen in the figure. I tried to scream, but my voice was stolen. The door slammed behind her. I turned, and outside, in the parking lot, I saw it again. The figure. Waiting. And I knew, deep down, that there was no escape now.